My name is Caroline Asiala. I'm the digital marketing manager here at Bobtail, but most importantly, my role at Bobtail is really the trucking business professor. That's what I call myself because I was researching everything there is to know about the trucking business, the trucking industry, and curating a ton of content for everyone here at Bobtail and all of our customers and anyone who really wants more information about trucking business, managing a trucking business, finance, fuel, compliance, anything you want to know, I will research it for you and get the answer. And so that's why I call myself the trucking business professor. We started our YouTube channel a couple months ago and started doing these sessions every other Friday a couple of months ago, and we've gotten really great feedback from them. We did a few episodes, let's say, or sessions on how to get better rates and negotiate with brokers. So if you didn't get a chance to go to those, check out our YouTube channel. My colleague, Maria Alejandra, will put the link to our YouTube channel in the chat. So go there, subscribe, and you can see all the videos that we put out, including the recordings from previous sessions that we've done. But today we are going to be here talking about how to avoid freight scams. This is a really big topic for us as a factoring company. We see way too much fraud in this industry. And the number one group that really pays for this fraud is truly carriers. And so we are on a mission to stop that. And we're on a mission that not one of our clients gets caught up in a freight scam. And hopefully we can together end scamming and fraud in trucking. So in the spirit of that, that's why we created this session. You'll hear more about this in the future. We've got a couple of our customers on the line, but Bobtail, we offer a factoring service for carriers with no long-term contracts and no hidden fees. And you'll hear more from Veronica in a few moments. She's going to talk to you at the end of the session about what that has to do with helping protect your business from fraud. But yeah, today we're going to go through some of the top tips that we have of how to identify fraud and how to avoid it and how to avoid losses from it. We're also going to talk to my colleague Donovan Reed about how to identify those signs of fraud when you're booking loads. Donovan is an expert dispatcher. Comes to us with decades of experience in the industry and lots and lots of knowledge from his experience specifically at Bobtail, looking through invoices and dealing with issues around invoices. So we're going to get started and kick it off. Let's talk about understanding what fraud looks like in trucking, specifically for carriers. Now, I will acknowledge there's a lot of fraud out there that maybe doesn't necessarily directly impact carriers. Some fraud that's actually carried out by carriers, unfortunately. Not anyone on this line, I know that, because you're all interested in protecting yourself from fraud. But today we're really going to talk about the types of scams that affect carriers and cause losses for the good ethical carriers out there. Double brokering is one of the biggest scams that we see. So double brokering costs carriers more than $100 million every year. Sometimes you'll hear that phrased as it costs the industry $100 million a year. And in reality, it's costing carriers $100 million a year. What is double brokering? Let me know if you know in the chat. Have you ever heard of double brokering? Have you ever been involved and gotten scammed by a double broker? Basically what happens, a broker will put a load either on a load board or give a load to a carrier, and then that carrier rebrokers the load without that original broker's knowledge or consent. They rebroker it to another carrier, and that carrier then goes and delivers that load. And oftentimes what happens is that first carrier that was supposed to deliver the load and rebrokered it will oftentimes disappear, go out of business before paying the carrier that actually delivered the load. We see this happen way too often. And many, many times it's that the carrier just doesn't even know that this first carrier is in fact a carrier and not a broker. They think it's a legitimate broker. They think that they're hauling the load for this broker when in reality they're hauling the load for somebody else, somebody who doesn't even know them. This hurts both sides of the story, right? Of course, this hurts carriers the most and impacts carriers the most directly because they deliver that load. They're not seeing a penny for what they spent on delivering that load. The fuel, the driver pay, the maintenance on the truck, all of that is a loss. But it also affects brokers because they don't know who actually has their freight. They don't actually know who has their load. So they're losing track of where that load is in the process. So this is one of the most common scams. Another sort of similar type of double brokering, I would say, is where the middle person who's committing the fraud pretends to be the broker that was on the original load board. So let's take TQL for an example. Someone might pretend to be TQL, take a load from TQL and then rebroker it, pretending to actually be the original broker, and then disappear. So those are some of the biggest examples that I can give of fraud and what we've seen a lot. We've seen carriers lose a lot of money on this. One quick note about blind loads. We got a question about this in the last session. Are blind loads real? What does that mean? Should I take a blind load? Blind loads are real. There's a reason that some shippers want to send a blind load. It usually means that the shipper is sending product from a facility and they don't want the receiver to know where that product came from, so that the receiver can't just go back to that facility and buy it from them directly, right? And so it's concealing some part either whoever the load is coming from or wherever the load is going to. So what's called a blind load or a blind shipment because of that. What is not a blind shipment is when the identity of the carrier is concealed. That's not a thing. The carrier should never conceal their own identity. If you are delivering a load for a broker to a receiver, the receiver should not be expecting someone else. The receiver should be expecting you, your driver, your truck, your VIN number. All of those things should be what that receiver is expecting. You should never have to conceal your identity. So a quick word on that is, if someone is telling you, well, it's a blind shipment, and so you have to tell them that you're somebody else. Don't trust that. That is a bad idea. All right, we're going to get into a couple of ways that we can identify the warning signs. So we know what fraud looks like. We know how it works. We know how it happens. But how can you actually identify it as the carrier? First, and probably most important thing, is the contact information of whoever you're talking to. If you get a load from any brokerage, but particularly a larger brokerage, it is very easy to see their official contact information. They'll have it on a website. They'll have it posted with the FMCSA. And whoever you're talking to, their phone number, their email address, you need to be looking at that very, very carefully. If the phone number doesn't match the phone number on the website, that could be a red flag. If the email domain, particularly, doesn't match the email domain of the broker and their website, that is also a red flag. Every professional broker should have a branded domain in their email address. That goes for carriers too. So if you're using a Gmail or a Yahoo or a Hotmail email address, we highly recommend that you invest the couple of dollars that it costs to get a branded email. So this means that, my email at Bobtail is hello@bobtail.com. It's not bobtail@gmail.com. Don't email bobtail@gmail.com. I don't know who that is. Don't trust them. You can trust hello@bobtail.com because bobtail.com is our website, right? So that can be a big red flag. If you're getting a lot of emails from Gmail and Yahoo and Hotmail, you need to do more due diligence. You need to do a little more research. And it's as easy as going to their website, calling their main line, saying, hey, I've got this load number 123. I'm talking to Bob about it. does this check out? Can you please confirm that Bob is in charge of load number 123? And they may say, yep, that's fine. He's communicating with his cell phone number. It's all good. Or they may say, we don't have a load number 123, or I don't know who Bob is, but that's not somebody who works with us. So just be very, very careful with this contact information. All right, next point here is check if they're using a factoring service. At Bobtail, we don't factor brokers, but there are factoring services out there that do. And if you have signed up for a factoring service, you'll know, especially if you're factoring with Bobtail, you'll know that you go through many steps of verification. You verify your ID. You have to send in your articles of incorporation. You have to send in your certificate of insurance. You have to send us a lot of information so we can identify that, yep, you are who you say you are, and you can receive payments for your company. Every factoring service does this. Every reputable factoring service does this, I should say. So if they're with a reputable brokerage factoring service like Denim, for example, you can verify that, that's a broker that's had their identification verified. So that's just one extra layer of protection. Again, it's not an end-all be-all. None of these are. They all have to be used in combination with each other to really work and protect yourself. A couple of great tools that we heard from in one of our previous sessions. Dale, who joined us for a couple of previous sessions, those are recorded on our YouTube channel, Bobtail Capital. FreightValidate.com, FreightClub.us. FreightValidate.com is a free tool that you can use to verify MC numbers and look at some of the potential signs of fraud with the information that they have registered with the FMCSA. For example, if they have a PO box as their business address, or they have a virtual office, or they're sharing an address, a business address with a carrier, that can be a red flag. That can be a cause for concern. And FreightValidate.com will let you know, hey, this particular broker has a red flag with us. We don't think that they're reliable. FreightClub.us is a vetted network of industry professionals. There's brokers, shippers, other carriers there to get to know and create connections in the industry. And if you find FreightClub.us, they have been verified by their systems. So we talked to a broker a lot about fraud in our first session, in our first two sessions that are available if you want to check those out on our YouTube channel. Okay, I would like to know, I've seen some activity in the chat here, but I would love to know if you share it in the chat, if you feel comfortable sharing. If you don't, no worries, but what are some other signs potentially that you see of potential fraud that we haven't talked about? We're going to talk about more of those in a minute. But anything about contact information, anything about different potential signs of that this broker or someone who's pretending to be a broker is not who they say they are? What would be some of the signs that you would look out for? All right, we're going to talk now with Donovan Reed, who is one of our customer service managers here at Bobtail. He has been in the trucking industry for many years, and he has tons of experience looking out for our carriers that factor with us and helping them identify not so honest members of our industry. So Donovan, thank you so much for joining us. Can you just start off introducing yourself and letting us know how long you've been in the industry? What's your experience in trucking?
Yes, you do. Sorry, I was muted. Hi.
No worries.
Hi. Thank you, Caroline. My name's Donovan. I work at Bobtail now, obviously. I work in the red team. That means we are the ones who are working to determine which of these brokers are the bad ones. And when a load comes across our processing desk that has these red flags, it gets sent to us, and then we start our investigation. But prior to Bobtail, I was a dispatcher for the owner of Bobtail's actually trucking company. We had 24 trucks at one point, did everything from booking loads to hiring the drivers, spending many hours on the load board itself, and many hours dealing with, carriers and brokers.
Yeah, so you have a lot of experience identifying fraud in this industry. Can you talk about the communication with a broker? What should that look like when you book a load, and what it should not look like when you book a load?
Yeah. First off, you should always make sure that you are getting carrier setup packets from the brokerage. No broker will ever just be like, oh, okay, that's fine. You can go pick up the load. We'll do that later. Having their documentation from them, from a source that is actually the company you are dealing with. Like Caroline mentions, you do not want to have a conversation with somebody over a Gmail account that claims they work for C.H. Robinson, TQL, Landstar. Those companies will not have a Gmail. Seeing that is a red flag immediately. If the person you're dealing with, if he offers you too much money, that could be a sign that, hey, why is he offering me more money than what the market is paying? Why am I going to make an extra $1,000 on a load that I, normally don't even make that much on? There's a reason behind that. Just the way he communicates with you. If they're constantly calling you, asking you the same questions, being very pushy about your location, being very pushy about asking you information, that means he's trying to get that from you to relay that to the third-party broker, the real broker, because they're on him. So it's all about the communication, because that's the first telltale sign. Make sure the phone number is actually associated with the company. If you book a load with the broker and he calls you from a number, do yourself a favor. Load up Safer or Google, type in the company's name, see which phone numbers pops up for that company, and call them directly. Call the main number you see and be like, hey, like Caroline mentioned, I'm on this load number going from here to here. This is the broker I'm dealing with. Can you confirm that this is a legit load? And if it is, they'll be like, yeah, that load belongs to us. That broker works for us. He's a dispatcher for us. But if they don't, then we have to go to step 2, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is a fine balance, right? If you get a load from somebody and they're not talking to you at all, they're not asking for any updates, they're not asking you to verify anything, that could also be a red flag. On the other end of that, on the other extreme, is they're being too pushy. They're being really over the top. They're getting unprofessional. They're not clearly, something is up. So either of those two extremes should raise a red flag. Of course, the broker is going to want to call and have an update now and then. In fact, you as the carrier probably want to consider calling them proactively and saying, hey, I'm here. This is where we're at. Here are the updates. Here's my expected time. All of those things are good to do proactive communication between brokers and carriers. But there's a limit to it. If it's too much or it's nothing at all, something might be up about that. Alfred Avila, I think we have a question from you. Do you mind putting Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for the invitation. This is my first, group Zoom, communication about this matter. The only time that we get, red flags is by having colleagues on the other line and talking about it. But I've been 3 years in the business.
Yeah.
I'm so disappointed that a couple of weeks ago, one of my clients got scammed. And let me tell you something, I feel, that it was mainly on my fault, because you know how drivers put a lot of pressure on you. Hey, do you have a load here? I've been waiting, for such and such long. What's going on? And then you see a nice load and you start, dealing, with the broker. And the broker had a legit, seemingly, a legit, letterhead. I don't know how he got to advertise the load on Truck Stop under a legit brokerage name. That's what it got me. It's like TQL advertising a load on Truck Stop, and then you calling that number and somebody else picking up with the same number that TQL has. That gets me. But it was not TQL. It was a brokerage firm out of California that I Googled, on the internet. It existed. It had a good MC number. The factoring company approved, but the accent did not, really, conquer me. And and this is what happens when every time I called that number, there was a delayed answering, and that's a red flag right there. But because you are under so much pressure to get your driver a good load, and Donovan actually, mentioned something really, really important. The load is too good to be true.
It's too good to be
Brother,
true.
Yeah, exactly. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Unfortunately, especially in this market right now that we're in, it's been really down. It's been really hard for carriers, and it's so tempting to want to take on loads that are seeming to be paying 40, 50, 80% more than average for that route. But there is a reason that that's happening, and you need to figure out what that
give
reason
me 1 minute to explain how this scam, I was able to tackle it down.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it was, and I'm going to say easy peasy. Okay, so easy peasy advertises a load on truck stop. A carrier calls easy peasy, give me the load, negotiates with easy peasy. It doesn't matter how much he negotiates with easy peasy. Easy peasy gives that carrier the load. Then that carrier posts the load on truck stop. Okay, that same carrier that got it from easy peasy, and he has some hacking system into a legit brokerage firm, and he advertises that same load that easy peasy has. So then I come in, I ask for the load because they never post the rate. So you negotiate the rate, they play with you, you play with them. Okay, let's do it. Then the guy says, okay, send me pictures once you're loaded. Good. We send the pictures to them. He sends it to Easy Peasy. They got a deal with Easy Peasy. They probably told him, you know what? I do it, for $2,000, but you gotta get me in advance $1,000. So that's what Easy Peasy does. He sells $1,000 in advance, and the guy says that he's going to do it for $2,000. A load from New Jersey to Arizona. Okay, so he gives me $6,000, and guess what? I load him up and all that. He gets to Arizona. The actual client is not there yet, but he's calling me to see where the load is, and it's a cash on delivery. By the way, cash on delivery. That's what it gets you sometimes. And I told the guy, listen, my guy's not going to unload unless you pay him. And I said, already paid $2,000. I already pay Easy Peasy $2,000. Easy Peasy sold the load for $1,000 to get $1,000. But the carrier doesn't get anything. And you know what? He's still in Houston with that truck on his trailer, and it's been 2 weeks, and he ain't not, releasing that that truck. I told him not to release it. Put it on a junkyard, and whatever happens, he'll get his money back if they don't show up.
Yeah, that's that. Thanks for sharing that story. That is a wild story, and it's unfortunately it doesn't even usually get to that point. A lot of the times carriers will just drop off the load. The driver drops the load, and then you're expecting to get paid by somebody who just disappears or goes out of business or whatever that may be. And a lot of times that happens because carriers make the mistake of giving up paperwork too easily and to the wrong people. So Donovan, can you talk a little bit about that, about the paperwork that goes into delivering a load and proving that and getting paid, and how important that is?
Yeah. So that BOL POD that you receive at that shipper, treat that as cash. Treat that as cash money. If you're expecting somebody to give you $1 or $100 and he hands you $1, you'll see, hey, this is different. Something's not right, right? So when you go to these shippers, when you go in there, you check in, they start loading you, they provide you a BOL, POD. Please, I recommend your drivers, and you, if you're the driver, look at it. Really thoroughly read what is on that paperwork. Because a lot of these double brokered loads, they'll tell you, hey, this load actually belongs to this company, and this is supposed to be the carrier. But if you're the carrier that goes in there and you pick up a load and it tells you, ABC Trucking's supposed to be hauling it, but you're not ABC Trucking, there's a red flag. immediately. You're like, what could this be? I'm not going to say that's 100% guarantee that that's fraud, because it's not, unfortunately, because we know these loads go from one location to another, to another, to another. The paperwork will stay the same for the most part, right? But it's always worth looking into. Just don't ignore it. Like, check in. Be like, okay, well, I wonder why it says that, and keep looking to see what else it says on it. It might even have a broker name. A lot of the times, the POD has the carrier and a third-party billing, and a lot of the times it's the other brokerage, right? So, yeah, have them inspected. I know drivers. Like I said, I dispatched a bunch of drivers. I know how it goes. You sit there, you wait for 5 hours to get loaded. You're angry. You've been there. You're wasting your time. You have to drive because your clock is running out for the day. You get the paperwork, you throw it in the truck. You'll see it in 4 days when you make it to your delivery, right?
Right.
But during that whole time, we could be working to figure out what's really going on here, or at least validating it. Like, hey, you're good on this one. This company has a working relationship with this brokerage. You know, they do co-broker loads, because these bigger companies, they do co-broker with each other.
Right, but you said before that there is another warning sign if a much larger brokerage, if a small brokerage is claiming to have a larger brokerage's load, that usually doesn't happen. Maybe TQL and CH Robinson will work with each other to co-broker something, but a smaller brokerage, very unlikely.
Yeah. It's not like CH Robinson will just give this company who just got into business 2 months ago, a load from California to Maryland or from California to Massachusetts. They're not just going to trust any random person like that, especially with the new authority.
They don't work with carriers a
Right.
lot of the time that are brand new, right? So if they won't do that, then they're not going to work with brand new brokerages either.
Yeah, no, they're not. And back to the paperwork, I recommend you writing your name on there. If you're the driver who did it, Donovan Reed, Donovan's Trucking Company, here's my MC number, here's my phone number. So that way, if that paperwork does somehow end up in the wrong person's hand, they will have to do some editing to get your information off that BOL.
Right.
Because the brokers don't want to see that. If the broker knows they booked, Caroline's company on it, but now they get the POD, but it has my company name written all over it, my phone number, my MC, they're going to be like, who actually picked this up? Who delivered it?
Absolutely.
So that's why it's important to fill out the paperwork. There's spaces on a lot of these PODs that ask for carrier signature. Sign it. And also write it somewhere else on the POD that you can see that, if they want to erase that, they're going to have problems because they're going to be taking off something that the broker knows this POD has on it.
And we just talked about rate cons the other day too. So we've talked about BOLs, but what about rate cons? When you get a rate con that could have been doctored up a little bit, what are some of the signs that that's happened?
We see that so often. Alpha mentioned it here too. And another thing is, like Alpha also mentioned, the fact that these guys can go onto the DAT load board and post loads that looks legit is a major problem. And that's unfortunately nothing I can do about it, nothing you can do about it, nothing Bobtail can do about it. That's DAT themselves. I know this investigation about this trucking fraud has gone pretty high up now. I know the FBI is involved in trying to pinpoint some of these things that's causing this. But yeah, with those rate cons, they will pretend to be somebody that they're not. They'll post a load under a reputable broker that they know carriers use, right? Somehow they get their information, and then they will send you a rate confirmation from them if you agree to book the load. But that rate confirmation will have some discrepancies compared to the legit ones, because they're not going to want to give you the real broker's phone number, right? If they give you a rate con, they're going to want to give you a rate con. So if you call that number, you're dealing directly with the scammer. You're never going to, they don't want you to talk to the real broker, right? So that's, again, when it comes to safer. If you get a rate confirmation and you see a phone number, you see the company phone number is listed as that, load up safer, Google them, check what their phone number is. What is the number that this company is registered under? If that doesn't match up, then there's a problem. So that's when you have to start investigating. The font, if you can tell a rate con just doesn't look in cohesion. You know, this is written in one font, this one's written in another. The size, the font size, if it just looks kind of like thrown together, it's probably thrown together. This, you know, these guys aren't technical geniuses, so they're just going to throw something together I think can fool you. So yeah, with the Raycon and where it comes from, make sure you're not dealing with a random Gmail. I'm not saying no company's not going to have a Gmail, right? We get it. Companies have Gmails, but you need to verify that person.
Right, right. These are all signs. These aren't necessarily each individual sign that you should definitely not take that load. These are just all signs that you need to ask more questions. So if you're getting emails from a Gmail account, just give them a call. It'll take a couple minutes. Give them a call, verify. Even if you're already out for delivery, if you still think, ooh, there might be something up with this and I just don't feel quite right, listen to that instinct, call them up, call the broker, or if you're factoring with Bobtail, you can always call us and say, hey, I have a bad feeling about this. Can I send you this paperwork? Can I send you this load? And let me know what you think. What should I do? We are always here to help our customers avoid those kinds of situations, because the last thing we want to do is get a load factored to us that we can't pay you for because there's something wrong with it. So that is the last situation we want to be in. And unfortunately, we're in that situation too often. And that's why we're doing this, so we can help avoid those situations from happening again. So we talked about how important that documentation is. Another really important thing is when you're handling that documentation, you've reviewed it, don't just send it to anybody. Don't let somebody bully you into texting it to them or WhatsApping it to them. Send it through those official communication channels. And if you're factoring with Bobtail, you can just send it directly to us, and we will always make sure that it gets in the right hands, because we have a whole database and a whole system of contact information for brokers, of official contact information that we know this is the right email for this person, this is the right email for this billing department, and we know how to get the information to them so that it gets into the right hands. So those should always be the official communication channels, either the official email of the brokerage business, or if you're factoring with us, you can just send it directly to us. Great tips, Donovan. Thank you so much. Can you talk a little bit about why it might be important to send your paperwork in for, if you are using a factoring service, to factor it as quickly as possible? Why is that another way that people can protect themselves?
Yeah, that's very important, honestly. You should, as soon as you drop that load or your driver drops that load, have them send you the documents and submit it immediately. Because what these guys do is, say you accidentally did send the wrong person that POD, he's going to turn around, say, thank you for your paperwork. He's going to call the broker, the real broker on the load that his carrier booked it through, and be like, hey, I delivered your load. Please quick pay me because I need fuel. Broker will look at the paperwork, look legit, because they don't communicate that fast either, right? The receivers and the brokers. A lot of the time, the only thing they care about is like, hey, did my freight make it or did it not? Okay, thank you, my freight's there. Let's go on to the next one. But for you, as soon as you get that paperwork, submit it to Bobtail. That way, if we do catch that a load was double brokered, we could still work to stop the payment. Right. Because if you call that broker and be like, hey, I was calling to let you know that the person you booked on this load from here to here, first you ask them, hey, did you today have a load that went from this location to the other location? They'd be like, oh, yeah, I did. I was like, well, to inform you, the carrier that you booked it with did not haul the freight. The person that actually hauled this freight was my client, and I have the proof to show you that. Immediately, the broker would be like, okay, let me check if this is paid out. If it's paid out, you lose. If it's paid out, nope, they're not going to repay for that load, you know? They're not going to pay 2 times. And the fraudster, he's not going to pay you. So you have to send it into Bobtail or to, you know, whoever you bill, even if it's the brokerage. Send it to them directly to the number that you know works if you're not using a factoring company, right? Send it to a accounting email at that company. Call the company and ask them, hey, what's your official billing information with a number you find on Safer or Google? Because the longer you wait, the less chances you have to recover your money, because they will move quickly. They don't want people to know. They don't want people to start questioning what's going on. You know, they don't want the broker to wonder, they just want to get paid, take their money and run.
Yep. Yeah, unfortunate as that is. And I know that a lot of people like to wait until a particular day of the week to factor invoices and do all of their, admin work in one day. That's just not something we recommend. If you can, the quicker you can factor invoices, the better, because if we do find anything wrong with it, the faster you send us the information, the quicker we can get to it and see if there's any issues and see if we have a chance of resolving any of those issues. Great.
Yeah, I'd like to say we're 100% successful in catching this, but a lot of the times, the load was delivered on Monday. Here comes the invoice on Thursday or Wednesday. And then when we look into it, we know, chances are of this working out is not much. But if we catch it like the same day you deliver, and we have that paperwork, we'll start working. Many a times we've called brokers and be like, hey, I'm letting you know this was double brokered. And they're like, oh my goodness, thank you. They even appreciate it. And they're like, okay, let me get this carrier set up. The problem is, though, with these people who are just here to scam you, the ones who's offering you $7,000 for a $5,000 load, they will never, ever pay, because they're booking you for a load. They're promising you more than what they're even making, right? There are other companies out there who are double brokering freight, but they'll charge you less than what they're actually buying it from a broker from, right? The broker's giving them. They will pay, but it's still illegal. And at any point, that brokerage can just decide to stop paying you. Oh, but I've done like 8 loads at the broker. I've gotten paid every time. But every time the BOL is telling you something it shouldn't, right? Well, we have to put a stop to it, because aging will grow. What they owe factoring companies will continue to grow. That just means that's more money that they're pocketing that they are not planning to pay out. And close the doors and have you fight over a $75,000 bond. We've had to file on bonds where clients got 8% of the load value that they hauled, because these companies are double brokering. They do legit business for a little bit, then they let their aging stack up, and then they pocket the money, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, and they make the carriers all fight over a $75,000 bond, which means you lose. So yeah, you have to be careful.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. You brought up that there are 2 scenarios, 2 ways that a double brokered load can go. Either you get paid, and it's probably, if you are getting paid for a double brokered load, it's not a good paying load, because it's already gone through 2 middlemen from the shipper to you, at least. And then on the other end, if you think you're going to get paid really great for this double brokered load, you won't see that money. Both of those scenarios are not good for carriers. This kind of double brokering is part of what depresses the payments and the rates on those loads, because it's going through multiple people, because everybody in that chain has to make some money. The original broker is making money. The person who's illegally double brokering it is making some money. And then you, the carrier, is making the least. So that in that chain, you're still losing, even if you do get paid a couple times from someone before they peace out on you. All right. So in the very unfortunate circumstance that you do become a victim of fraud, if you have in the past, you may have seen some of this information before, but the first thing you want to do is file a police report. This is illegal activity, and you should file a police report regardless of whether or not the police actually has jurisdiction to go after these guys. That report will at least give you some basis for a collections claim if you're able to make one. So file a police report first, report the incident to the load board. Unfortunately, this is load boards are a part of this. They're a part of where people are getting scammed, and they need to know about this. And the more people report this information to them, hopefully, the more that they will respond to that. Then contact the real brokerage if you can. Again, if you're factoring with Bobtail, call us, because we might be able to get them on the line faster than you can, or we'll at least be able to know and identify what's happening, what's going on, and what to do about it. But if you're not, you should be able to contact and figure out who the real brokerage is. Let's say you see it on the POD there. Call them, contact them, talk to them, see if you can, if the payment's already gone through to the scammer. Maybe you're not going to be able to get anything, but maybe you beat them to it. Notify if your insurance is involved at all, if there's something wrong with the load, something happens where your insurance might cover something. Again, the load boards and your factoring company, and then share your experience. So if you joined one of those platforms that I listed before, like freightclub.us, share your experience in that group, share your experience in the Facebook groups you're on. Make sure that these scammers aren't able to get in touch and scam other carriers in the industry. That is a way that you can at least protect future scams from happening. And unfortunately, the powers that be who register motor carrier authorities do not work super quickly. So if you report the incident to the FMCSA, which you should do, and the USDOT Inspector General Office, which you should do, they are big bureaucracies that have too few people working for them with tons of cases on their backs. They are not able to work very quickly. And so it's not enough just to report it to them. They are, hopefully doing their best. We hope that law enforcement takes this more seriously in the future and can work on our behalf to get some of these people out. But these are other things that you can do to hopefully protect other people in the future. Last thing I want to talk about is how to legitimize your trucking business. So this is on the other side. Remember that fraud is not double brokering and scammy brokers that show up overnight. They're bad news for carriers. But there are also, unfortunately, carriers out there who are also committing fraud and are not fine people like yourselves on this call who want to end fraud in this industry. Unfortunately, there are carriers that will show up and steal loads, steal freight, take things hostage. And you don't want to be mistaken for a carrier that might do that. And so some of the ways that you can legitimize your business. First of all, we talked about email domain. It really doesn't cost that much to get a branded email domain. So do that. Get that email domain so that you look like a really legitimate carrier. They can match your company name to your email domain to your website. That's another thing you should do. Create a website. Create a one-page website. It's not hard. I work in digital marketing. I didn't study digital marketing. It's not hard to learn. You can do it. You can go get a nice little template from Wix or Squarespace, create your own website, put your contact information on there, maybe put what trucks, what equipment you have. It can be so simple. It can be just as simple as that. And with your branded domain, that adds an extra level of verification. So a broker is saying, this carrier is interesting. I haven't worked with them before. I'm going to look them up. So they Google you and your website shows up. That looks pretty professional. Your carrier packet. So we're actually working on putting together a template for our customers that you can download to have a template for your carrier packet and a checklist of what that carrier packet should include. But those things should include things like articles of incorporation, certificate of insurance. Make sure your certificate of insurance, it doesn't always do this automatically. Sometimes they won't automatically put the VINs of your vehicles on the certificate of insurance. Ask your insurance company to do that. You should have no problem doing that. It's a pretty common request, but it's not always there as a default. That's really good because then you have your certificate of insurance and it has all of the VINs of your vehicles on it. And then your broker, your customer can say, hey, all right, they sent me a photo of their truck. matches, that VIN number matches what's on their certificate of insurance. That looks really legitimate, really professional. And it's something you're doing proactively, saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to send you this information. I'm going to send you pictures of my truck. I'm going to send you pictures of the driver's license, my driver's license so you can check it, the driver's license so you can check it. And that makes you look really professional and proactive. Another part of this is to have a legitimate business address. If you're working out of a PO box or a virtual office, get a legitimate business address, and don't share it with a brokerage. Even if your best friend is a broker, cool. Have separate offices, have completely separate businesses, and make sure those are staying apart so that people don't think that you're double brokering loads. If you're thinking about having running a brokerage alongside your carrier authority, it's just not recommended to do that. Keep those businesses nice and separate. Have different people who are in charge of them. They should have different contact information, different websites, everything, so that it doesn't look like you're double brokering loads from a carrier. Another part is to offer all of this information up to your customers, make it really easy for them to access it. If you're sending a PDF, it should be lightweight. It shouldn't, if you ever upload really heavy documents to Gmail, for example, sometimes it'll give a little warning, a little red warning. Make sure your documents aren't too heavy so that it gives that warning. Make sure everything looks really, really nice, clean, and professional. So those are some of the ways that you can legitimize your trucking business. Donovan, do you have any other words on that? What are some other things that carriers might want to do to look legitimate in front of brokers?
Yeah, like she mentioned, go ahead and get yourself a nice carrier packet with all your information on it, right? There are some references on there. You want to look like the good company. You want to look like you have your ducks in a row, that you're a professional. If they need anything about your company, they can go look at a website. Like she mentioned, it's also cheap and easy. You can have it, probably get it done on Fiverr. It's a website you pay somebody $5 to make you something. And it'll just be a one-page website that just shows your company information and the way to reach you. That way, to your safety as well, because carriers' information is getting hijacked as well by these scammers, right? They're booking loads through brokerages when they have no association with companies. That's a major issue. So your company information should stay the same. It should be one thing and one thing only. It shouldn't be like, oh, you can reach me here, 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 and here. One phone number is where you reach me for my business, and then I have my drivers. That's it. Website and all that. You want to look like a good carrier. You want to look like you are a professional. You want to look like your company knows what you're doing, so they feel safe giving you these loads. Because just like we're vetting brokers, they're vetting carriers as well. They're so scared because if their freight gets in an accident, whose insurance is going to cover it? Yours isn't, because you're not even supposed to be on the load. The person who booked the load, his insurance is not going to cover it because he's not on the load. So what's going to happen? So the brokers don't want this, and they are also taking steps to do this. This is why it is important. Yes, we found out 2 months too late that you got scammed on the load, but it's also still important to report that to the real brokers, so they can put a hold on that carrier. Like, okay, hey, I'm not giving this carrier any more loads. I've had an instance this week where we caught a double broker. Called the real broker, and he's like, oh yeah, I have this carrier on it. And he's like, oh man, I have 7 other loads with this carrier on it. So they immediately started, that started a chain reaction. Like, okay, when we get this paperwork, we know, don't send out any money, because chances are they did not haul this load, right? So they need to look for the real people who hauled it. So it's always important to report them and just get them flagged so they can't get any more loads.
Absolutely. All right, we will get to questions at the end. We just have to give this little plug to Bobtail. I know quite a few of you are already factoring with Bobtail on the line, so we're so grateful for your business. But I'm going to hand it over to Veronica Blanco, who is one of our sales managers at Bobtail, for a very quick rundown of what our factoring service offers and how you can sign up.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you for the time allotted to Bobtail and be able to talk about factoring services. Guys, we've been talking about important things that are very important for you to consider. We're talking about not being scammed, right? One of the things that is important for us to also acknowledge is once you are set up, once you are ready to actually factor that first invoice, you're ready to receive the money for your hard work. And that's very important to you. So for us, it becomes a very important factor as far as, hey, are you winning on your end? One of the things that, especially new carriers, unfortunately, this happens to them because they're not aware of what to expect, is you deal with factoring companies that reach out and they tell you, or they promise you these wonderful rates, just like a scammer would promise you a wonderful rate for that load. If it's too unbelievable, it's because it is. So you got to be very careful when you're talking to a factoring company. If they're offering you rates such as lower than anything that has to do 3%, especially nowadays with how the economy is, you have to stop and you have to read that contract. One of the things that we are strong advocates in Bobtail is, if it's a long-term contract, stay away from it. We are not a long-term contract setup. We do 30 days setup agreements pretty much. Why do we do that? The reason is because as long as you're winning on your end, we're winning, and it's a win-win situation. But if you happen to sign up a very long-term contract, and for the most part, these start with 1 year, what can happen is, yes, you got a lower rate. Maybe you got a 2.5 rate. But hey, you know what? The thin lines in the contract, they didn't tell you about. What are those thin lines? What are they talking about? Well, guess what? Now you're also, responsible for paying extra fees that you weren't made aware of. This is the situation with long-term contracts. Sometimes they say, you know what? Bobtail's offering you this rate. Well, guess what? We can offer you lower. We'll offer you a 2%. If it's too unbelievable, ask them, is there a long-term contract for this? What would happen if I'm not happy with you guys? How would I be able to terminate that contract? Now, for the most part, long-term contracts have a termination fee, and terminations fees can go up to $15,000. We've seen it. Unfortunately, the carrier doesn't know that when they're actually signing up. And this is why we tell all our carriers, listen, if you don't sign up with us, it's okay, but do not sign up with a long-term contract. Always think about your business. It's kind of like marriage. If you're not happy, you're going to have to wait until that contract ends or pay something out of your pocket to get out of that. So additional fees. You think about, hey, you know what? I'm going to get my money. All I need is a company to give me the money and charge me a rate. That's what Bobtail does. We don't charge you for any invoices. We don't charge you for anything that we're going to make up in a contract. That's all we do. We just charge you a rate. Long-term contracts, you have to think about the rate plus now you have a factoring cost. I'll share with you a quick story. I had a guy that reached out to us from, this was last year. He didn't really speak good English. He spoke mainly Spanish. And he reached out. I told him the same thing. I said, whatever you do not sign a long-term contract. Unfortunately, he went and signed a long-term contract. I'm not going to say the company name, but he was signing up for a 2.5%. He called me a month later. He's like, no, Veronica, please help me out of this contract. I don't want to pay anything that has to do more than 2.5%. They were charging him 6% because the 2.5% was there. But then guess what? They were charging him 4% for reserve fees. And by the way, guys, it's your money. Why would a factoring company have to keep your money? They call it reserve fees or saving account. I don't need a saving account. You tell them, I have my own personal savings account. You give me my money. You don't want to sign up with these companies that have long-term contracts. Other additional fees that are hidden are ACH fees. They can go up to $30 for every invoice that you factor. They're going to charge you for every invoice that you have to collect for. Why? Everything is electronic. It's not like papers involved. So be very careful with this and think it's not just the factoring rate. If they're offering you a long-term contract, most likely there's a factoring cost. So one of the things that we definitely do is recommend be careful with those long-term contracts. And anyways, guys, if you're new, best thing you can do for your business is try to test the waters. Start with a company that's going to set you up with a 30-day setup. You want to make sure that, Everything is transparent. And that's what we're dedicated to here in Bobtail. Our value and our mission here is pretty much working for the carrier. If you're not happy, we're not happy. Transparency is very important. How do we become Bobtail? I'll share a quick story with you. The owner of the company was a dispatcher for his dad. He was a driver. He loved his dad. He made sure that he got good loads. He also signed up with factoring companies, but one of the efficiencies that he saw was there are no factoring companies that can set you up with 30-day agreements. And you're stuck to these very long-term contracts, having to pay very high termination fees. So he said, you know what? I'm going to make that available for carriers. Now, that's how Bobtail was born. That's a great story to have behind a company brand, because now you know and you can be sure that we're not just here to sign you up. We're here because we're actually working for you. And these workshops are actually a true example of that. So be very careful with scammers. You want to read that long-term contract. And if you have a contract and you're not sure, reach out to us. We can tell you what's going on in that contract. And if there is already a signed contract, we can look at that contract and see about buying you out from that contract. We can definitely explain step by step how that works, but don't stray away from reaching out to us if you need a helping hand.
We just got disconnected. I apologize for that. But Beto, thank you so much for closing us up and taking us home. Yeah, if you're interested in factoring with Bobtail, maybe you're already factoring, like Zacarias has already made the excellent decision to factor with Bobtail. Again, you can call us, visit our website, bobtail.com. Donovan's making a really good point in the chat there. Be very, very careful of Amazon loads. They are notoriously double brokered, triple brokered probably. And yes, Zacarias, we're going to do more in the future. You can see all of our previous events. They're all recorded. They're all online in our YouTube channel. Again, search for Bobtail Capital on YouTube and you will find every single one of those recordings, as well as a video from yours truly. Every Friday, we talk about different and teach about different aspects of the trucking industry. So go ahead and check that out. Again, I'm Caroline, your trucking business professor, and my goal is to help your trucking business thrive. So if that sounds good to you, go there and subscribe to our channel. Keep an eye out for more events. We will likely do this same event, the same topic for the next couple of weeks. And then we will move on to other topics. Let us know what other types of events and topics would be helpful for you. So we've gone through how to negotiate with brokers and how to work with brokers. We've gone through how to avoid scams. What are some other things that you guys have questions on? Is it the needing help and support in starting your business, figuring out what you should do with paperwork and compliance, figuring out what kind of ELD you should have in your trucks? We can answer all of those kinds of questions, but we want to know from you, what are the biggest questions that you have? I know I've seen on Facebook groups recently a lot about how to hire drivers. So that might be something that we do in the future of what are the steps you can go through to hire a driver. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I apologize for that cutting out. I hope that our other members that were on the line aren't too disappointed that they missed out on this very last piece of it. But we will go ahead and send everybody an email and following up on our event. And again, if you have more questions, don't be afraid to reach out. And we will answer some of the questions that we already had in the chat. We'll send answers via email. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day and weekend, and good luck out there. Drive safe.